The year is 2000. Inside Motorola, and inside a bankruptcy process that has already stopped pretending this is a rescue, engineers are writing a death order for machines that still work. 66 satellites are circling Earth in low orbit. They talk to one another. They can complete a call from a ship in empty ocean to a desk in Washington without a local cell tower. Rockets from California, Kazakhstan, and China put them there. The network is operational. The lights are on. Motorola is preparing to drive them into the atmosphere. Not because the hardware failed. Not because a solar storm tore the Constellation apart. Because the company that imagined this sky no longer wants to be responsible for it. Iridium, the satellite phone venture Motorola assembled with partners across the map, has collapsed. The money behind those spacecraft sits near $5 billion. The customer list is a rounding error against the original plan. Lawyers talk liability. Controllers talk deorbit burns. If no buyer appears, the satellites will be commanded to fall, and they will burn. This is not a metaphor. It is a disposal plan for a working global communication system.
Stand in that contradiction. A private constellation, already in orbit, already able to reach places no terrestrial network can reach, is treated as hazardous waste. $5 billion of metal, software, launch contracts, and ground stations is one signature away from becoming streaks in the night. The public will barely notice. Most people never owned an Iridium phone. Most people never will. The question is not whether space is hard. Space, in this story, already succeeded. The question is how a company can freeze a product in one decade, deliver it in the next, and discover that the market it was built for has vanished. Then decide that destroying the infrastructure is cleaner than owning it. Someone has to decide whether those 66 satellites deserve another life or a funeral.
The idea does not begin in a war room. It begins in 1987, inside Motorola's satellite culture in Arizona, with a complaint that sounds almost domestic. An engineer's wife cannot place a call from a remote stretch of vacation. The men around the problem do not think smaller towers. They think of a mesh in the sky, low Earth orbit, crosslinks between spacecraft. A handset that could, in theory, work anywhere the heavens were visible. They name the project after the element Iridium, because the first architecture counted 77 satellites, matching the atomic number. Later, the constellation is cut to 66 operational birds, plus spares, flying in polar planes a few hundred miles up. The poetry stays. The product is already being locked. In 1987, the terrestrial map still has huge blank spaces. Cellular is analog, patchy, national, and expensive to roam. International business travel means dead zones in airports, oil fields, mountain highways, and entire countries. Motorola's assumption is rational for that year. A premium traveler will pay almost anything for a single number that works on Earth. The company does not merely sketch a phone. It commits to a system whose physics, manufacturing, launch cadence, and billing all depend on that traveler still existing when the last booster fires. That is the blind spot. A satellite network is not a software update. Once you freeze the handset mass, the antenna, the orbit, the intersatellite links, and the ground gateways, you have frozen a decade of capital. Motorola and its partners spend the 1990s building to a 1987 weather report. While they do, the ground changes under them. GSM spreads across Europe, then Asia, then into roaming agreements that let a business traveler land in London, Frankfurt, Singapore, or New York and use an ordinary pocket phone. Digital cellular gets cheaper, smaller, and socially normal. Hotels install lines. Airports fill with coverage. The sparse map of 1987 becomes, for the people Iridium actually priced for, a mesh of terrestrial cells. The product that finally rolls toward market is a brick. The Motorola Satellite Series handset costs about $3,000. Airtime is billed around $7 a minute. The phone is heavy. It wants a clear view of the sky. It sulks indoors, in taxis, under steel, between towers.
For a banker walking from a terminal to a hotel, it is worse than the device already in his jacket. Iridium's engineers have built a marvel for polar ice, open ocean, and desert. The business plan still talks as if the marvel's main customer is the same international executive who, by the late 90s, can roam on GSM. The contradiction from the death order is already encoded here. The sky is being built for a world that is dying in real time. Nobody in the program can easily turn the factory around, because the factory is orbit, spectrum filings, partner capital, and a Motorola identity that has bet prestige on finishing what it started. By the time service is ready, the design is not late by a few months. It is late by an entire cellular generation.
Motorola in these years is not a timid licensee. It is a hardware empire that believes big systems can still be willed into existence. Iridium is supposed to prove that the company which helped put cellular into American cars can also own the planet from above. Executives talk in launch manifests and partner syndicates. Lockheed, Raytheon, and a chain of foreign investors and manufacturers are pulled into the gravity of the project. The motive is not only profit, it is status, a Motorola sky, a Motorola number, a Motorola answer to the fear that terrestrial standards might someday belong to Europeans. Edward Stiano is the operator put in to make the dream behave like a company. He comes out of Motorola's manufacturing discipline and treats Iridium as a machine that will work if volume arrives. Volume is the hidden god. The original model needs hundreds of thousands of subscribers, then more to service the debt and the operating contracts Motorola itself holds to run the network. Stiano's incentive is to force a consumer launch, advertise globally, and fill the funnel fast enough that the sky pays for the sky.
The engineers who first imagined the links between satellites are chasing coverage and latency, a technical beauty almost no passenger in first class will ever see. Their motive is the closed mesh, a call that hops from bird to bird without begging a local PTT for permission. That beauty will later become the only reason the system is worth saving. It is not, in the 1990s, the thing the billboards sell. Then there is Dan Colussy, who does not belong to this cathedral at all. He is a retired aviation executive, former president of Pan American World Airways, a man whose career trained him to look at expensive metal that other people have already decided is worthless. When the consumer story sours, Colussy does not see a failed fashion accessory. He sees aircraft logic. A fleet is still a fleet if the routes are wrong. Change the routes. His motive is colder than Motorola's pride and less romantic than the Arizona barbecue. He wants the infrastructure at a price that matches its actual market, not the market in the 1987 slide deck. Motorola's motive, by the end, flips from glory to extraction of liability.
The company is still tied to operations contracts, still exposed if dead spacecraft become debris, still watching a subsidiary consume cash. For Schomburg, killing the Constellation can look cleaner than remaining the adult in the room. Three hungers share one orbit: a manufacturer that cannot admit the traveler left, a CEO trying to stuff a mass market into a brick, and an old airline man circling a distressed asset, waiting for the moment the owners would rather burn it than discount it. November 1st, 1998. Iridium opens for business. Vice President Al Gore places a ceremonial call. Ads speak as if the planet has been issued a new telephone exchange. The handsets reach shelves at luxury prices. And then, the funnel does not fill. Early subscriber counts land in the low tens of thousands, then stall near the neighborhood of 10,000, when the plan needed on the order of 500,000 to begin making the arithmetic less obscene. The phone will not behave in the places executives actually stand. It wants sky. Cities refuse. Cars refuse unless someone bolts on extra antenna hardware. Friends of the project still love it on oil platforms and ice. The target market does not. Stiano pushes. The company spends on marketing like a consumer brand, then discovers it has built a radio for people who sleep under open weather. In April 1999, he is gone. The debt does not leave with him. Iridium's capital structure was built for a land rush of users that never arrives. Motorola's operating agreements keep meters running. Every month, the Constellation costs real money to babysit, even if nobody calls from a Zurich taxi.
August 13th, 1999. Iridium files for Chapter 11.
$5 billion of development, manufacturing, and launch does not become $5 billion of equity. It becomes a crater in the syndicates that believed the 1987 traveler would wait. Creditors line up. Motorola's problem mutates. It is no longer a growth story. It is a going concern that can generate orbital wreckage and legal exposure if abandoned badly. Through late 1999 and into 2000, the company prepares the option everyone in the industry still talks about in a low voice. Command the birds down. Deorbit. Let the atmosphere do the demolition. The network that works is scheduled, in effect, for deletion. This is the climax, and it is strangely quiet. No explosion on a pad, just filing deadlines, letters, and the knowledge that a controller in a ground station can end a global mesh with burns and patience. Dan Colussy's group moves in that window. They do not try to outbid the original dream. They wait until the dream is classified as scrap. In 2000, the investor group buys the space infrastructure out of bankruptcy for $25 million. Read that distance again, but do not relitigate the construction cost. The point is the discount. A completed constellation, gateways, and spectrum position changing hands for the price of a modest office building in a hot city. Motorola gets distance from the corpse. Colussy gets the fleet. The purchase would still be a hobby without a first customer large enough to keep the lights on. The United States Department of Defense supplies that customer. The Pentagon does not need a brick for Manhattan. It needs polar coverage, ocean coverage, a system that does not die when a local switch is bombed or a coastal cable is cut, and a network whose crosslinks do not depend on another country's gateway politics. A contract on the order of $72 million for DoD use of the system arrives as the crucial bridge. Unlimited airtime for a defined government user base in the frame of those early rescue years is not a consumer relaunch. It is oxygen. With that oxygen, Colussy's team executes the pivot Motorola could not emotionally make. Iridium stops pretending to be a mass-market accessory for roaming executives. It sells to maritime firms, aviation, mining, disaster agencies, and governments.
The product-market fit flips from the hotel lobby to the places GSM still cannot be bothered to go. The same handset limitations that were fatal in 1998 become acceptable when the alternative is silence. The wound does not close neatly. Employees of the first Iridium are scattered. Partner balance sheets have already taken the hit. Motorola's reputation for visionary systems engineering now carries a museum piece, a perfect sky attached to a frozen price list. The satellites that were nearly dumped continue to pass overhead, serving a thinner, harder clientele. Value has not been restored to the people who paid for the original construction. It has been transferred at fire sale speed to owners who bought the right market on purpose. And then the consumer story is over. What remains is infrastructure with a new invoice. A long product cycle is not a moral failing. It is a clock. When the clock runs longer than the market's memory, the factory finishes a world that has already left the building. Iridium's first life is what happens when a company treats a decade as a tunnel instead of a weather system. You can be right about physics and still be wrong about who will open a wallet. You can launch on time against your own Gantt chart and still be late against GSM. The later profit of the rescued network does not retroactively bless the original plan. It indicts it. The asset was always valuable to ships, militaries, and crews at the edge of maps. The disaster was insisting those users were a side door, while the front door was a traveling class that had already slipped into a smaller phone. Colussy's cheap purchase is not a miracle of courage so much as a correction of audience. He pays for the system as it actually is, a specialist utility. Motorola had paid for a fashion. Fashion expires. Utilities, if someone keeps the batteries charged, do not. There is a colder aftertaste for any institution that builds slow things: constellations, chip plants, medical platforms, power lines. Inflexibility is not the same as quality. Quality can be the enemy if it cements a handset, a price, and a customer portrait before the ground network finishes eating your premise.
The Chapter 11 filing is the receipt. The deorbit memos are the confession that even success in orbit can be priced as waste. Walk outside on a clear night, and you can still imagine those planes of metal sliding over the poles, offering a dial tone to empty water. They were almost commanded to become fire. They survived because a buyer stopped asking how to sell a brick to a banker and asked who still cannot call home. The haunting question is not whether another company will overbuild. Someone will. The question is sharper. When your machines finally work and the crowd you built them for is gone, will you have the nerve to change the customer, or will you write the order that makes the machines disappear?